But if we're going to sing the melody. This song is about a beloved community, our church, and it made me think of Tom because he supported our community so much. And anyway, it's a perfect song, I think, for the occasion. And if you want to, the chorus of this song is "And We Believe in Life." If you all can sing it with us after we sing it through one time, you can sing the chorus with us because it's really a great song. And here's we laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in love and in the strength of love. And we have found our need to be together. And we have our hearts to give. We have our thoughts to receive. And we believe that sharing is the answer. Our lives are full of wonder and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we share with friends, they will linger on and on. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that He's within our living is the answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a joy to be together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see even to question truly is an answer.
You feel better for your own sake and for ours too. Sure it is.
Roger. Been turning the mic on for you, sir?
I'm going to take a
Children, we now have service for you all.
to the back. You want to come?
It's refreshing to see so many young ones, especially as some of us are getting toward the top of that ladder. And it's good to see some young ones coming on to take our place. Originally, today, we had a speaker scheduled. But I felt in lieu of Tom's passing that it would be more appropriate for us to just take some time today and remember Tom. And I'm going to ask Barbara to light a special chalice for Tom.
In our time of grief, we light a chalice in memory of our dear friend, Tom Gaston, the flame of symbolizing his life here on earth. In this time, we search for understanding and serenity to face our loss. We gather here in one strong body to remember our loved one. The happy times, the trouble and sad times, and how Tom was always there with the right words to make us all feel stronger, more loved, and accepted. This is the time we remember the bonds that bound us to Tom, the love that we share, and the memory that remains with us forever.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to lead off, and then I'll ask other people to share memories. I'll try to get through this. You got to quit that. Tom was really special to all of us. In the past 14 months, we have lost 3 pillars of this congregation. In January of last year, we lost Kathy Lemaster. Kathy was instrumental in getting this congregation going. And before she had any opportunity to see it come the way that it is now, she passed on. Then Edna Macon. I didn't really know Edna until the last couple of years, or a couple of months before she passed away. But I did have the opportunity to go over, and even though she wasn't able to speak, I could talk to David, and she seemed to really enjoy just listening to us talk. So I will always remember Edna. And then Tom Gaston, who was like an older brother to me that I never had. And he was also a mentor to me. When I was elected to be president of the Board of Trustees, I didn't have a clue what I was getting into, what I was supposed to do. So I leaned on Tom a lot. He lived 3 blocks from me. And so I would go over, and just as a friend, I'd go over, and he, you all know, he was a storyteller. And he loved to tell stories. And as it happened, we were both combat veterans. He was a combat veteran of Korea, and I was in Vietnam. And according to the stories that we told each other, we were certain that he single-handedly defeated the North Koreans. But he wasn't too sure about what I did in Vietnam. That didn't end too well. But we shared some really, I mean, I'd go over there, and you know, Tom was a talker. And I'd go over there, I'd tell Barbara, I said, I'm just going to run over and see Tom for a little bit. Well, it'd be 3 or 4 hours later before I got home. But I enjoyed every minute of it. But he told me, because I went to him and I said, Tom, they want me to be president of the board of directors or trustees. I don't have a clue. He said, Roger, he said, I didn't say it that way. He said, Roger, I'm gonna tell you, I want you to do 3 things. And he told me, he says, number 1, build that congregation. It's in your hands. It's up to you. Build that congregation. Secondly, build or create a spiritual program so that when people come, they'll get something of meaning and that they'll want to come back. And third, he said, develop leadership. He said, I'm going to tell you something about Unitarians. They're not followers. They're a wild bunch. And they're not going to do something just because you say that it should be done. But he said, they're a different breed. He said, sometimes you're going to feel like you're trying to herd cats. And he said, but they're special people. They're intelligent people, and they have lots of talent, and it's going to be your job to figure out what talent goes where. And he said, you know, it's going to take you a while. You're going to have to try to figure out who's going to become leaders. But that's your job. And I told the board of directors, the board of trustees, sorry, at one of our meetings, I said, I have 3 goals. And I laid them out. They thought they were mine. But now I'm going to tell you the truth. They weren't my goals. They were Tom's. But I picked up the gauntlet. And I believe in those 3 goals. And there was one other thing that he was very, very adamant about until the very last day that I saw him alive. Every time, when he was in the hospital, when he first went to the hospital, whenever I went to see him, he says, okay, what's happening with the building? Are you getting a building? You've got to get a building. You have to have a church home. And so I would tell him, in fact, one time when we were looking at the one location on 26th, we had a PowerPoint presentation, and I thought, well, I'll take that over. I doubt if he's going to feel like watching it. Oh, no. He says, I want to see it. I want to see it. And even though his eyesight was not good, we went through that slide presentation, and he was so excited about it. And, of course, that didn't happen. But every time he would say, what are you doing to get a building? Well, folks, we are going to get a building. We're going to keep at it until we have our home. So you can count on that. I know that everything we've looked at has had problem of some sort, but we are going to get a church home. And I'm going to dedicate it to Tom Gaston. So, we have 2 more pillars in this congregation that I have come to rely on, and that's JP and David Macon. And so I'm going to be coming to you for advice and support and ideas to make this congregation grow. So, Tom, wherever you are, we love you. Anybody else that would like to tell Tom's story, this is your chance.
I love Tom Gaston. When I first met Tom Gaston, the other church, he got up and was telling a story. And I decided he's the man that I'm most likely to learn to finish his sentences for him. But I couldn't, because his wisdom was so far beyond moi, okay? And I was so blessed to be able to spend the last 3 weeks of his life with him in the hospital and at home. And, you know, we all brag about hospitals. No one comes fast enough. And they don't, because they're overworked and underpaid. But for Tom, he never failed, no matter how bad he felt. He would always tell that person, "Thank you for the wonderful care you've given me." Every time. That's what Tom did. He built us up. And he was genuine. And we looked at Tom as our light in the dark. But you know what? Tom gave us all light. And he wanted us all to shine. And that's what I'll always take with me from Tom Gaston. And I was glad to be able to say goodbye to him, even though he was in his coma. But he knew I was there. He knew all of you were there. He loved the videos of the sermons. We watched and he listened to those things, every one of them. Every one of them. And he was so pleased. Just, I can't express how pleased he was at the talks. He was so pleased with everybody's dedication and presentation. So always remember that. Thank you.
First met Tom Gaston way back in 2000 when I was working for the public library, and I hired him to come and do an event for the children when I was children's librarian. The name of his character, his magician character, was Mr. Magic. And there was no finer performer that I've ever seen or that I could see on anywhere, on Broadway, anywhere. And then a couple of years later, I joined Toastmasters, and he was a mentor to me, learning to become a better speaker and more confident person. And then I came to the Unitarian Church, and Tom was there again. And he was just one of those people that seemed to follow me, or I was following him. I'm not sure which. But I feel sure that he was meant to be in my life as well as all of our lives. So I knew him a long time, not as well as I'd like. But the impact he made on my life was tremendous. And I can think of no better or truer description or name that's more than a stage name for Tom Gaston, because the man was truly magical. He was Mr. Magic.
As kind of a new kid on the block, I am selfishly sad that I did not have some more time to get to know Tom Gaston better. But the first time I heard him speak here, I was so taken with his demeanor and this wisdom that he exuded. In fact, for I don't know, the first 3 months I was coming here, I thought he was the minister. You know, I didn't realize that Unitarians don't have a minister. But to me, he was a minister. And during my career, I worked for a number had a number of superiors. And through working with these different people, some of them good, some of them bad, occasionally there would be a leader who I wanted to follow. He did not have to tell me what to do. I wanted to do things to make him look good. And Tom had that sort of leadership quality to him. And, you know, over the last few, when he was in the hospital, and actually starting with that random act of kindness business that we were doing, I was on that committee. And we got to talking one day after one of those meetings for hours. We talked. We can both talk almost, you know, endlessly. We could get to it. And I learned a lot about Tom. And I went to see him in the hospital when he was in the hospital, and we were talking about all these things that we talk about. He's a retired English professor. I'm kind of into English myself, and so we had a lot in common that way. And he decided that he wanted me to read to him. And that was his biggest mistake, because I love to do that. So I had this book called 1491, which is about what was going on in the Americas before Columbus showed up. Excellent book filled with, I hope to give a talk here one of these days about what's really going on in that part of the world that we know nothing about until now. So I went over there, and I was just going to read the introductory chapter. And about 45 minutes into reading the introductory chapter, I realized that it was about 50 pages long. But Tom, in his pain and everything else, he still insisted that I continue pressing on and reading, you know? And by the time that I was done, we were both like, I was like croaking, I could hardly talk. And he was like, you know, and Pam's sitting over there shaking her head like, what is this guy ever going to show? So in a weird sort of way, I paid him back for the, you know, all the talking that he would do. But I really enjoyed that, and I did go there a couple of times, and I just so much regret. It's such a special kind of man that I was, you know, a short time ago, I was learning to love him, and I really regret that he's not with us, but we are all living proof that nothing lasts. We're here for now. Transience on the morrow. Transience where, what we're going to do, who knows. But Tom is transiently moving somewhere. And I think he's still kind of watching us, and he will be with us for a long, long time. And if nothing else, he will live in our minds for as long as we're around. Thank you.
It's really hard to think of him being gone at this time, because we are just about ready to take the last step to where we are in church. In other words, finding that home we're looking for, and that he was so keen on having. I wish he could see us settled in a home, but that wasn't to be. And I was very intent on that, because to me, we would not be here if it were not for Tom. Because when events occurred that left us bereft and homeless and without direction, he stood there and constantly herded us back together. Kept telling us, look ahead, do not look back. There is a future here. Do not look back. Do not feed on bitterness and resentment. Try to steer away from that. We know it's going to be hard, but stay the course. And I can tell you, this man was just developing a plan the whole time. I didn't realize it because I was so upset and so angry. And he was developing the plan step by step. And then he said, okay, now we need bylaws. And I went, oh, what do we do with that? Thank God we had people who knew what to do, how to write these. And others stepped up and started leading the congregation. To me, it's amazing. Because the whole time, other people were taking over this aspect or other. He was always there guiding, always there with advice, never pushy. He's just, this gentle southern way. He'd let us know, maybe not quite this way, how about we try this? And it worked. And look who we are. It's a joy to think that he has made it possible for us to be where we are. Of course, my biggest regret is that he shall not see us in our home. And I'll never forget how kind he was to Gabriella when he came for her birthday party and made such a joyful occasion of it, because he was really magic. He was.
We know any one of us could probably stand here and sing Tom's praises all day long. So I just want to share a little bit about what he meant to me personally. I met Tom, I think Dylan was 12 or 13 when I met Tom through the Unitarian Church, and grew to really know him better through the Twisters, because I got involved with Twisters for Dylan's sake, because I felt like it was important that he do community service. And that meant that I was doing it too. So he really took an interest in Dylan. You want to go see Susan? And later, when we went through some life changes of my family then, and in Dylan's later teen years, Dylan had some challenges, and so I did as well. And Tom was so supportive and such a mentor and counselor, and so incredibly non-judgmental. And always I felt better after having talked to Tom. So he is one of the most genuinely caring people that I've known. Now, he wasn't, he could be a little bit shameless sometimes. When Dylan graduated and went off, I sort of stayed in Twisters. They needed people, so I kept doing the balloon twisting less often than I had before. And I've pulled back now. I just haven't been able to do it really since Ian came along a couple times. But before then, I was still involved even after Dylan went off to college. And I was trying to pull back, but Tom would come up to me and he would say, well, Molly, do you think we'll see you this Saturday? In his drawl that I can't do, but I would say, well, I'm not sure, Tom, I'd like to, but, and he'd say, well, we're going to have an awful lot of expectant kids there, and sure would help an old man sleep better at night if I knew I could count on him. Of course, I would say, okay, Tom, I'll be there. He was incredibly humble too. I think he was aware, of course, to some extent, how could he not be, of some of his gifts, but incredibly humble. and when I visited him in the hospital, not this last time, but when he was in the first time after surgery. I was there for quite some time, probably longer than I should have been, but we had visitors coming in and the chaplain came in. Anyway, I stayed, read a little bit to him from the newspaper. And at one point, I guess before I left, I gave him a hug and said, you know, Tom, I just wanted to tell you, I've never told you, but you're one of my very favorite people. And he seemed so surprised. I was surprised at how, kind of a little bit embarrassed. But, he said, oh, really? Oh, well, I just don't know what to say. I mean, I felt like that was a given. And he was just so humble and seemed genuinely surprised when people express how much he meant, does mean to us. So that's all.
Oh, just right high, I think. Oh, it's sides. Oh, there, okay. Pardon me, I might be a little long, and I might take a little different viewpoint than, not a viewpoint, but tell things differently. Seems like Tom and my life touched in ways that we didn't know at the time. He grew up in Davidson County, Tennessee. Davidson County and Nashville merged their governments back about 40 years ago. Northeast in Davidson County is the Hermitage. If you've ever been to the Hermitage, Andrew Jackson and Rachel's place, you were in Tom's home territory. DuPont plant had her there on the Cumberland River in World War I, working with ammo. In World War II, they made nylons, which you ladies learned about after World War II. And the last I heard some years ago, they were making something called Remax. I don't know just what that is, something in construction, I think. But that was Tom's territory. Neely's Bend, if you ever hear of out in the county of Neely's Bend, that was also his territory. I taught school at DuPont High School, my first teaching job. In World War II, it was like Ernie Ford, talking about the company store. Well, that's what it was back before I went there, but the houses were still there. They had sold them to individuals, but they had that look. Wonderful community. Then we both were in the military about the same time. Now, Tom was born, we were born within a year of each other, and I would say that he was born in 32. So we both were in the military in the 50s, in the Korean area. And then he went on to teach at Purdue University as an English professor. And one of his handles as an email was Wordmaster. He had 3 or 4 emails, but one of them was Wordmaster. And then Terry, I think, and Molly both helped me a little here on time. I don't really remember the first time I met Tom. It just seemed like we just merged from nowhere or something. But I can tell you a few things that I do sort of remember about that. When he came here, he didn't bring Maggie with him. And I understand, sort of indirectly, that he came to Owensboro, apparently when he retired, because he had a daughter that her husband had come to run a sporting goods store. And I don't know whether it was just whether she had some problems or why, but anyway, apparently that's why he came here. He had to go and get Maggie. Now, Maggie was in Virginia, and she was a biology teacher. And Tom had he had known Maggie, by the way, 40, 50 years back, she and her husband. Tom lost 2 wives to cancer. Maggie lost a husband to cancer. So what followed was that Tom got interested with Maggie, and I remember him saying right in the seat of church, took me a while to talk her into it. And one reason, she was settled in Virginia, and Miss Emily, her mother, was not in very good health and was around 90 at the time, pushing 90. So Tom and Maggie were married at the seat of church. And I'm going to say about 8 years ago. I'm not too good at going, 9 years ago, okay. And then soon after, they made a trip back and got Miss Maggie. And I remember Tom telling the group how well she made. Now, she was, I don't want to say bedfast, but in poor health at the time. And he said how she made the trip. Said, well, she wouldn't even let us stop and take a break. She wanted to get here. So they fixed a room upstairs for her, put in one of these expensive stair lifts, and I don't think she ever used it, but anyway, they had it there for her. And she lived for several years, and the last 2 years or so, my time, and I don't keep me too tight on that, but she was in a nursing home, and I reckon they almost spent one of them over there almost continuously, or had somebody to be there with her almost continuously. And she passed away, just a few months ago. I don't remember, but they carried her back to the home territory in Virginia. And I'm glad that Terry mentioned that Tom had a little entertaining side about him. And she put the date on it. So he was here in 2000, according to what she says. But when he came here without Maggie, he had a van. Now, it wasn't a big moving van, but it was one of these big, sort of like Town and Country, except it was more that old style, a little bit bigger. And it was painted up with all kinds of stuff on it. It looked like a circus vehicle almost. And when Kroger opened about 10 years ago out of West Parish, first time I went there, there was a bench. You know how benches advertise, some business, and it's a seat for bus stop type thing. Well, they had a seat out. It was right part under the awning in front of Kroger, and it was Tom advertising his the magic show, And I'm sure that's what it was that Terry was talking about that he came to do. Well, I may get back to that in just a minute, but let me get back to where Maggie is. Part of what I'm saying, I know a lot of you didn't know Tom Harley. You haven't been here long and that kind of thing, and you know now who we're talking about. But I also want to say, with Maggie, now she has no blood relatives here that I'm aware of. She has no children, and I don't know her situation back in Virginia. But as we country people used to say, relative-wise, I'm talking about friends, that kind of thing, she's up creek without a paddle. Now just imagine, she moved here to be with Tom, and they had a wonderful relationship, but at the same time now he's gone. So my thinking is we're the only one she has. Now I know there's going to be in-laws, but in-laws are not the same as family. So I hope some way that you that know more about these kind of things than I do, that we can be sure and hold on to Maggie. Now she may want to go back to her home territory. I have no idea. But I do think that Maggie is a UU. Oftentimes spouses come along because one wants to go to the UU, well, they'll go along just to be a good spouse and that kind of thing. But I believe Maggie sort of took root, so to speak. And I say that because she was president of the seated group for a year back some years ago. So that says a lot. I don't think she would have been had she not been in with us, so to speak. So what I'm trying to say is that with all honor to Tom, I want us to turn to Maggie and hold on and do what we can do. And I don't really know what I could do. You guide me if you see I need it. But anyway, back to Tom now with his magic. He put on a show, I'm going to call it a show, at church on one Saturday night. And he had a practice session, and Dylan was his side man, so to speak. And I went to the practice session, and you'd be surprised what I learned as far as magic goes. And Dylan was a good, am I saying that right, Dylan? Dylan, okay. As side man, and he was real good at it, just fell right in place. And then he actually, Saturday night, had a show at church. And if you remember Elizabeth and Charlie, I believe she went by Elizabeth Drake Board, and since she's lost Charlie, and she lives in Oregon now, but she was a fine soul too, because she would bring little neighborhood kids. She lived fairly close to here, just over on Cedar from here. And she would bring little kids along. And I'll never forget, one little boy, 6 or 7 years old, was so enthralled with what was going on, he couldn't stay in his seat. He would run up, they'd have to push him back. He wouldn't look, see, that man just tore him up. It was, I just really remember that. So one thing that I recall about Tom is I want to use the word versatile. He was smart in more ways than one. He kept worrying me after Edna passed away, wanting to take me out to eat. Well, Tom, I'm all right. I got a microwave. I do this and I do that. But he just, when I see him often, he just had to take me out to eat. I never really understood just what that was all about. But anyway, I thought, without really saying it, I thought, well, I'm just going to need to go and get him to be quiet. So we went out and had a wonderful, and this wasn't long ago either, by the way. It was after Edna passed away, and I'd say 3 or 4 months maybe before he got sick. But we went out to Shoney's, and we really had a wonderful time. So I have, in many ways, I have good thoughts of Tom, and he taught me a lot too. I'd like to just pass on one thing that he did taught me. I had, you know how you end up with pieces of things, and I had pieces of rope, and well, what you gonna do with those? Well, I'm just gonna throw them away. And well, wait a minute, don't do that. Let me show you. And he went through a little process, sort of showing me how to do this and that. And he said, and see, it's one of these. So I've got many remembrances of Tom, and I agree. Tom, in his own way, is with us. And some people have trouble on the other side of adjusting, but I don't think Tom will have a bit. He's magic. He'll be right with him there. Thank you.
I know it's running late. I just want to say one thing. Tom was a dear friend. I miss him terribly. He was terrific in trying to keep the previous church together. I was one of the sociopaths that was giving people a lot of trouble, and he did all he could to bring that together. And when it could not, we ended up with this. So I'll miss you all a lot, Tom.
I remember him 2 hours long. He just had a meeting trying to get things going.
That's right.
There's a lot to say, but I'd just like to focus on Tom as what he taught me about service. And he was amazing in how he was effective in serving other people. I mean, that's what really stood out to me about him. And I'm kind of selfish with my time, and I know I ought to do this and that. You want to do other things, but especially through Twisters, I got a feel for that. Noah was involved. My son Noah was involved, and Noah and Dylan really took it, a long way. They were really good, and they did a lot, and I was involved with that, especially when Noah was doing it. But more recently, and I'm so glad this happened, it was when Tom was doing his pay it forward thing. And a lot, Tom's real enthusiastic and a promoter, and a lot of us aren't. So the pay it forward thing wasn't going too well. Tom was pretty much carrying the whole load. And I think he was a little frustrated, and this one day he, was trying to get us fired up about it. I guess we weren't really responding to it. And he said, well, I'm going to go to the park, and I'm going to, take my balloons. And he asked me to go with him. I don't think there was anybody else. I said, okay, let's do it. And it was just a wonderful afternoon. I mean, he knows how to do it all, and I was kind of his assistant, and I was kind of really rusty on my twisting, and finally he says, well, Brad, why don't you go kind of direct but it just felt so good to get out and, the smiles on those kids' faces, and I mean, he really taught me something about service and you know, how that brings it gives joy to others, but it also brings joy to yourself. And that's what I remember. I mean, he was wise. He had unbelievably wise things to say. But what I really remember about Tom is his service and his ability to serve.
Kind of like Dean, I'm kind of jealous of all you guys who got to spend a lot of time with him. I knew I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him. But even though I didn't, it was like the second time I was here, I got up and I was talking about my struggles with addiction and how bad of a time I was having with it just in the very beginning. I mean, it's been since September that I've been clean, but in the very beginning, every hour was the worst. And I really didn't know how you guys were going to take some young addict in here, you know, and me talking about it. And after the service, this big, tall man comes up to me. I'd never talked to him a day in my life. And he hugged me. Put his big arms around me. And he said, I'm really proud of you for speaking about that, for being strong and speaking about that. And I don't know how to explain it, but for a few years before my addiction had become really bad, the word proud was not a word that anybody that knew me used. I'm proud of you. What was that? I hadn't heard I'm proud of you in a long time. To have this man come up to me and say he was proud of me. I'll never forget that, ever. That meant everything to me. And I just wanted to hear him talk every single time he opened his mouth. I just wanted to hear him talk. Anything, he could say anything and speak for any amount of time, and I just hung on every word. And I just started this new job at the hospital, and when he was in the hospital before this last time that he was unresponsive, I had just started the job and I was getting used to it, and I was always running so late to take my break that I would go up to the room he was in and he would be asleep, or he would be, you know. And I didn't get a chance to talk to him because I was learning my new job and here, there, and everywhere. And when he came into the hospital this last time and he was unresponsive, I felt like I missed my chance to hear him speak one more time. I missed my chance. I was there and he was there. But I never got to hear him speak again. What I would give just to hear him speak one more time. Just one more time. But I was talking to him when he was in his coma. I was telling him that, you know, and I was telling him I'm sorry I didn't get to come and see him, and how even though I've known him for just a short time, I was so appreciative just to have any time with him. And I was at work the other night, and I was cleaning a room, and I looked down on this piece of paper that had these labels on there. And it was the day that I saw on the listserv that he had passed away. And I said to myself, when I saw listserv, I said, Tom, I really wish that I could have seen you one time, even one time more, even if it was just in the state that he was in. And I was cleaning this room and I saw these labels and it said Thomas Caston. I got to clean his room. And I said, Tom, thank you for giving me this sign that I got to clean his room, the last room that he was in. Out of all the 25 housekeepers that were there that night out of all the hundreds of rooms that were in the hospital. I got to clean his room. And I'm very honored about that, and I thank him for that. I'm just gonna miss him, that's all. You guys got to have more time with him than I did. That's all. I'm just-
Three things about Tom was his lovingness, his kindness, and most of all, to me, was his ability to forgive. Thank you.
Being somewhat new, I didn't know Tom. I'm sorry for that, but I appreciate everybody that spoke today and shared your remembrances of him with the whole group. I want to remind everybody of the discussion group this afternoon at my house at 2 o'clock. We started out meeting at 4, and then we decided, well, we'll try 2. See if people find that more convenient coming right after lunch. So my address is in the bulletin. If you'll join me now in our closing words.
Just a second. We've got to extinguish his.
Oh.
Just a second. We extinguish the flaming chalice that marks Tom Gaston's physical death. Yet the memories of this special person and his special talents live on in each one of us. His beautiful spirit is unshakable. He touched all of us in a special way. He will live on in each of us. And as Tom, if he was here, and he would probably say, life is precious. Handle it with care.
For those of you who are able, if you'll please stand. And now may we go forth in the certainty of faith, in the knowledge of love, and in the vision of hope. And in our going, may we be blessed with all good things on this day and forevermore.